Another all-time high. This one was definitely interesting to say the least because of what happened yesterday. And I'm wondering if we were a little bit bamboozled yesterday. We're going to get into that a little bit of detail here in a second, but we should just talk about it. Just absolute ripper. And then if you really look at it, you started right around that 9:30 and you just exploded after the data comes out. The data is a non-event. Then you kind of pushed and you went from there. But watch the NQ. And I think that this is very telling. If you look at the NQ and you see how we pushed right around that 3 o'clock, that last hour, it was just straight buying. Now watch what happens when we go back to the ES for a second here. Look at this, straight buying. So that last hour that we're always supposed to be looking at, just straight out buying. That last hour tells us what institutions are doing. And I find this really interesting. Now, I'll tell you why. Yesterday, we saw this with Oracle, and we were told that there were cracks in Oracle. And if we really go back to where Oracle is a day later, look at these cracks and look at what happened. And what we saw more than anything was we saw this level of just outright puke. And then from there, they just kept buying the whole way up. So I think this is really interesting. It almost feels to me that, and I hate to go with tinfoil hat, but you have these articles that come out that scare the living heck out of everybody. And then if you go and take a look at literally a day later, what happened? They took advantage of those articles. They bid these names up, and then they're closing at highs with huge volume. They did it with Micron, and they did it with a bunch of names. It really does seem like smart money kind of trashed dumb money here, or let's call it retail, as I'd rather refer to it. But it does seem that way, guys, and we're going to call it what it is. And they did an excellent job of it, because when I saw that, there were a couple people that were talking about the article with Oracle, and they said that it was before part of that group that they're talking about even went online, something about the changeover, and that's why the margins were so low. But it is what it is. So if I take a look at Micron, you're closing at an all-time high. Take a look at SanDisk. You're closing at an all-time high. I think it's very interesting, to say the least. And I think I'd be remiss to not point it out. Another thing that just continues to happen, if we take a look here at AMD, I don't understand why this keeps happening, but it's happening a lot more than any time in 26 years of trading. You're getting good news, and then they're selling you down. Then you get an inside day or a really bad day, and then they just rip it. It's like all of a sudden they're waking up to the news that was over here. And I'm not sure why this keeps happening, but look at this volume today. And these nuances are really very important. So obviously you have the straight out buying. And one of the things I put in the community today, put in the room, was out of nowhere, you just started seeing massive buying. Now, yeah, you get the buying off the open and everybody wants to own it, right? And we all know where that key level is, but look at what's going on in here. As a matter of fact, I even put that in from the room, because when we saw this bar just out of nowhere, watch when we go to a 1 minute chart and you just start seeing them fire into these bars. Now, these 1 minute bars, if you start really looking at what's going on in them, this one was the 1246 bar. And if you look at that bar, it's around, the volume's about 1 million. So you're firing in here and someone's buying $250 million worth of stock and they're just firing in over and over again. I think this is really telling, because if you look at this area in here ahead of it, you don't have anything like that. And people always ask me, like, do you get into this kind of nuance? And yeah, I do. Because you can see how dead we are down in this area. And then out of nowhere, especially over our moving average, anything over 5, I pay attention to. Like if you're 5x, wherever the moving average is, I'll pay attention to it. And then all of a sudden we're up here, it's like 8 to 1. So it automatically will hit one of my scans and pop up. And then what you saw from there was just more of it firing in again and again. And these are not small orders. So this really made me think about this, trying to figure it out. Now, you also remember yesterday, and this is where it gets screwy. Take a look at Dell. This was yesterday when we were doing this in the pre-market, and we were talking about how great it was that they doubled their guidance on earnings and doubled their guidance on revenue. And of course, they were giving their Dell Analyst Day. But here's what I find so fascinating about this. So you close at 150. After they bid you up, you came all the way back down to the previous close and hold it. Then they gap you up and you're breaking out on the exact same volume. It's almost like they're doing it on purpose to shake people out. But I just don't know if people are not understanding when these things are reporting. It's really very confusing to me, to be honest with you, because it's not something that you normally see. You usually see, boom, good news, and then the stock will get some kind of bid to it. We're not doing that as much here. And that is adding to the confusion of the market. And quite frankly, I think it's adding to the volatility. And I also think it's adding to how people are trading right now, because everyone has got that kind of cat in a hot tin roof. Now, we also know that we're in our blackout period. And that blackout period means that a lot of these names can't be bought. But when you're hitting these levels, like for example, semis, and you're reversing, and now you're going through it, it's a big deal. That's a really big deal to have something like that where you have this black Marabuzo and right next to it you have a white one and you're going to flip. It's not normal. You don't usually see this. Maybe we're doing a little bit of the shake and bake and that's what's got it. Now, you also have what's going on with gold. And gold just obviously is gapping up yet again on huge volume. And you have a lot of issues overseas with what we're seeing with what's going on with France, for example, right now. And that is a little contained to France, at least for the moment. But we all know that EU is a little contained with each other, right? So we know that France borrows from this guy borrows from France. So we know that they're all interconnected one way or another. And that is leading to the central banks are a little concerned. So they're out there buying more and more gold. All right, so we have that. Then we go and take a look at the dollar, and we see that the dollar hasn't really dropped since September 17th. And if you start going looking back at where these CPI and PPI numbers are, this one will definitely ring a bell. We also, of course, have the Fed meetings, and that, of course, will ring a bell. You can actually go and mark some of these off where you had CPI or PPI or a Fed meeting. Now, why do I care about this? Because if this starts breaking out and hitting higher highs, well, all of a sudden, some of the names that are in there in the US are going to start getting way more interesting. Well, why? You have a lot of banks that are in the EU that will actually, a lot of banks that are, when the dollar is flat or goes up, they will convert and they will start converting into dollars. When they start converting into dollars, they actually put money into the stock market. And that can actually make the stock market go up even higher than it is right now, which is kind of interesting because you came off all that here when it came down. So that can actually lead to that. And my larger concern here is when I went through all the research this morning with Oracle to tie it all back together, I did not see anything here whatsoever that was telling me that, hey, yeah, we're really concerned about this. Quite the contrary. It was, they're going to grow into it. Even Jensen, they're going to grow into it. What is Jensen supposed to say? Yeah, it's a real issue. Buy our product, but your margins are going to be awful. No, they're obviously not going to say that. But I was very surprised at how many people just blew that article off. So that ties us to the next thing about, okay, well, what about demand for stocks? So what I'm trying to do is put pieces of the puzzle together if you can't figure it out. And where I'm going with it is when I look at these names, like here's a great example. Let's do the CIFR. And this was a name that everybody loved. And then they came out and they said they're going to do a secondary. And I'm going to clean this all off because you're going to see this pattern over and over again. Once they come out and they're going to do these secondaries, right here is when the secondary happens and they do it in here. And then what happens? Stock comes out, hits a new high. You're seeing massive demand for these secondaries, for any kind of secondary. And what's starting to happen here is people are starting to understand that. So here's SkyT, and this is something that I'm in. They announced a secondary, and it was this day when it started cracking after being up. We were down in here, so I trimmed the trade, and I'm like, oh, good, they're going to do a secondary, so it'll come down. Far from it. What's starting to happen is the cycles are getting shorter, and so now maybe you're getting a day. Maybe you're getting a day when they're down. And that's telling you that there's massive demand for stock. So the stocks they're usually getting hit on these secondaries because people know that they're going to have to price them in the hole. That's not what's happened the past couple of days, and I'll give you examples. So here's JOBY, and all of a sudden, this is something that's going to do a secondary. So secondary comes out Tuesday night, does a secondary. Look how it closes. So all they did all day today was just buy this. That's all that happened today. They're like, oh, they're going to do a secondary. Somebody will get the secondary and then we'll go back out and we'll take out the highs. That's becoming the thought process. So with SkyT, that didn't even drop. What is this telling us? It's telling we have huge demand. We have enormous demand for stocks still. This is really surprising to me that this is actually happening today, specifically after what we saw with Oracle. So what I'm trying to do again is connect the dots. If I take a look at IREN, which has obviously been a huge high flyer, and I will close my 1,000 levels off. Now, this is something that we had a huge trade in. I had this blow off up in here and decided, okay, that's really it. I got to close a bunch of this and I'll just start day trading it and trading it around because you're up 50% or something ridiculous from our entry in less than a month. I think it was 135, 140. We'll call it 135 at the close. All right. So, in a month, it's crazy. And now we're getting, that bar and then, oh, good, they're going to do a secondary. So the stock's going to get smoked. So just so we're clear, I couldn't even get below today. I couldn't even get below the low of that bar after they're announcing that they're going to try to raise hundreds of millions of dollars today. This is telling you that there is massive demand for stock. So again, I tie it back to the Oracle move where we looked at Oracle, and I'm trying to tie it together so you get it. At least how I think, you might not agree, but when I look at Oracle, I'm like, man, we knew where this huge wall was at 270. There was a ton of gamma there, and we knew this. And we watched how it bounced yesterday. We did this short. We did very well with it. But then watch this bar bounce. And look at that. It's literally like a $5 bar. That's not retail, right? So that's an algorithmic and then they hit here and the algo just pops it right in. You can never break it. You can never get near it again. It never happens, right? All right, so they buy down there, and then what that does is scare the bejesus out of everything else. So if you looked at Oracle in the time that that happened, that's when the market fell apart as well. All those names that came in, all of them, if you go and take a look at Micron and how that played out, higher high, SanDisk, higher high. I mean, all-time high closes today, like it's nothing. STX. These things are even holding a little bit better. Not a lot, but a little bit better. We're getting an inside day here. Very interesting. AMD flips, and after hours, it's up another $2. It was over $238 a little earlier today. I think that this is telling. So what does this mean, and what do you do with it? I think it means that when you start seeing these things price secondaries, you actually want to realize that they're just going to revert right back. What I think you want to do is understand also that you're in a blackout period. And once that blackout period's done, then you're going to be in a position where these companies are going to be able to start doing corporate buybacks, which is going to be end of October. So how do you tie all this together so you can get a sense of it? I also see them rotating into some of the Mag 7 names. The Metas, for example, all of a sudden that 700 put wall's holding. Look at the close here today. Right now you have a new higher high close. This is the highest close you've had in 4 days. Right. And I do think that's important. This was Friday, and you haven't had a close under that Friday level. Now, we'll see what happens this Friday with it, but take a look at Microsoft. Same thing. You broke out inside, but you're not breaking down. And they are buying these days. They are buying the Dells of the world. And I would have thought it would have done this yesterday, but here we are. So then the question becomes, well, what do we do? I think you're better off understanding that you're going to be extremely volatile for the month of October and trading around. So if we have names like ASTS, this was fantastic news, absolutely fantastic news. And this was a great trade. They did a secondary here, and then all of a sudden, this is exactly what we're talking about. They're not caring about the secondaries anymore. They're just buying them. So, you're going to do a secondary? Great. It's going to give you the opportunity to buy the stock. The stock literally announces a secondary here, closes here, announces a secondary, opens at 67, and they run it. Today you come in from 67 where you bought that here, and then they announce their Verizon deal. Now, there is a call wall up here, and you ran right into it, and you slammed into that call wall. And I think that that's very important for us to recognize that you hit that, and that was the end of it. Matter of fact, if you just kind of look at it from here, you can't miss it, right? I mean, literally right into it, reverse, and that was it. That was the end of it. But that is a massive, massive move in a name. And this happened on the heels of that move, which was the announcement of a secondary. So again, we're seeing huge demand for what? For stock, because there's just not enough stock out there for these guys that have, these bigger accounts. How do we play this? And this is where my head's going with it. Here's NDFI. And if we look at NDFI in these past couple of days, here's Friday, Monday, Tuesday, when we were down, we know we're going to be up today by the time that this prints. Today is Wednesday, the time of recording this, right? So what does this mean for me, and why do you care? Because even when we're down, we're not breaking the 50. If we go look at F5FI and we tie that one to it, did we break the 50 level yesterday? No. And I think that this is telling us something. So I'm a little apprehensive to go crazy here and say, okay, we should look at really getting back in here. We got bamboozled. But I am looking at this market as a whole and saying this is really interesting the way that we acted today. Very different than how you would think you would act in a market that doesn't have a blackout period, right? Like if you didn't have a blackout period, you would look at this and go, oh, that's why we're getting so much buying going on in these names. But if you realize that the corporations themselves can't eat up supply, then this is what's happening. Another thing that's really starting to become very, very clear, especially if you're trading on the short-term side, is these 430 continues to hold over and over again. 420 came down here, but that 430, you just keep holding this level over and over again, undercut, bounce. And it's something that if you go out a little longer term, you really can't miss it. I can draw it from here over, and you'll see it even better, but resistance, support, resistance, support. So over and over again, where the 20 is the same way. Like these are really huge levels that you're defending. And then you have the 450 up here on Tesla. Now, out of all this, and then on top of that, what else happened today? The Fed minutes, which shows that they're going to cut rates. They're all in agreement of cutting rates. Now, does that change because the government shut down and they might not get that data? I'm not so sure that it does. I think the larger question for us is, where do we go with this? And I think you have to look at this really in my opinion, on a case-by-case basis right now. For example, if you look at Costco, which tomorrow will probably have a decent day, you're actually bidding up right now about $20. Their sales were through the roof. Their sales were absolutely incredible. And I find that so interesting because we're supposed to be worried about the consumer, yet their sales are up. So is it because people are buying in bulk they're going there? Well, digital sales are up like 26%. And so then I start going through like these other names and looking for the cracks or looking for any signs that we're really going to roll over on the whole market. Because I think you're really at an inflection point here. And I felt that way yesterday. And whenever I feel that I'm at an inflection point, see how we're just wedged in from that control bar from September 5th, XLF's never gone anywhere. Whenever I feel this way, or and I start getting to the point where I'm looking at it and I can't read the tea leaves the same way, or whether I'm right or wrong, if I don't have a bias, I tend to just get out of the way and let it settle. And that article was one yesterday that was pretty clear, like, hey, there could be a problem here. But they so far have blown that off. And I think that's very telling. And that's something that we're going to have to watch tomorrow. For now, what I would suggest for the rest of the week is let's see how this plays out tomorrow and see if you have follow through. It's very difficult to look at AMD and not think that you're going to have follow through in that name. And if you don't tomorrow and you reverse, and let's say you took out that low, well, that's going to be really telling for the market. And I would be using AMD as a barometer. The other thing that I think you should be using is Dell right now, frankly, because Dell broke out today. And so if these names start breaking out from these levels and they start moving, then yeah, we need to pay attention to them. Not only to them, but to the market. Again, if they're going to blow off that data or they're not going to pick up this data point as something that is significant, then that's also a tell, right? And I don't think you have to rush into anything, but I'm going to clean this off for a second. I don't think you have to rush into anything, but if I was to tell you that, oh, Oracle's going to talk about an issue that they're having, and then we're going to look at something like NVIDIA here. And just so we're clear, when you see this, it's really kind of staggering to me that you closed at an all-time high on NVIDIA today. And let's just pull that down so you can see it right there. You closed at an all-time high. And no one's even talking about it. It's like a non-event. And that on the heels that they were just talking about, oh, we're going to have this big glut now with Oracle. It doesn't really look that way, guys. So let's see what tomorrow brings. That's it.